you're just joining us, you are coming now to the pointy end of the book of 1 John. We're rounding the corner to the finish line as we head into chapter 5. We're not quite done the book, but we are definitely beginning to round the corner. My topic this morning, if I want to give a overall subject line to what I'm saying, is simply faith that overcomes. I've never been much one for titles or thinking up good titles. Never really felt a super need for them, but there you are. If you want to have a label to what I want to talk about, this is what we could discuss. Because John has been helpful to the church for the last 2,000 years, or give or take, since he wrote this book, to understand the marks of a genuine believer. Because it is easy for anyone to lay claim to knowing Christ, to lay claim to having some sort of affinity to God through Christ, and there seem to be no myriad of those people who want to say this or say that or believe this. How do you know who is real and who is not? The book of 1 John lays it out very plainly, that in fact there are people who would claim to know Christ but do not. John lays out that there is a theological test. This is an overview, remember, of the entire book. If you've been working through these chapters with me, you might remember this. There's a theological test, and he puts this test to us. What do you believe about Jesus? Do you believe Jesus is the Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah? That he's not just a man? There are those who would tell us and teach today that Jesus, upon his baptism, he was just a human being, but received something from God. The Holy Spirit came upon him, and through that time, he was a miracle worker. He was different. He was above everybody else because God was on him. And then at his death, the Holy Spirit went back to heaven, and Jesus died a death like anybody else. That is a heresy. That is not who Jesus was. What do you believe about Jesus? Your theological understanding of the person of Christ is a trademark distinction of whether truly you know Christ. Do you believe that he is the Son of God? This is the test that Jesus put to the disciples. You might remember in Matthew 16, he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Other people were saying what their opinion was of Jesus, but he wanted to put the test to them. What is your belief about me? Simon Peter replied, verse 16, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." He came to know and recognize who Christ is, not because he decided for himself, but something outside of him spoke to his own spirit and told him. The Spirit of God told him this. You don't come to know this. It's not revealed to you by flesh and blood. It wasn't something somebody taught you. God himself taught you. And if you have a right theology about Christ, it is only because God himself has put in your heart an understanding about Jesus. No one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. We read in 1 Corinthians as Paul writes. Why is that? Because you can't confess Christ as an ongoing basis as Lord of your life unless you've come to meet him. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. Every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. 1 John 4, verse 2, and the beginning of verse 3. Every teaching that diminishes the person of Christ is not from God. So, it is not only about your theological understanding, there's also a moral test that John holds our feet to in this book. Do you live a righteous life? Not a perfect life, but do you live in the trajectory of righteousness? It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Do you seek and do you love his commands? Is holiness something that comes to your mind, that you recognize should be a part of your life? That there's a desire and a hunger towards living these things out? This is what Paul warned in the book of Galatians. The works of the flesh are evident. Then I've truncated this, leaving out a great section which would take me longer to read than it is to explain to you that I've taken it out. A list of very human sins. The works of the flesh are evident. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. When your lifestyle is such that you live in ungodliness, it is evidence that you don't know Christ. because the person who's come to meet him and know him has a hunger and a thirst for righteousness. Jesus said it this way, Matthew 7:18-20, a healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. That's the metaphor. Look at a tree. What kind of fruit is there? Look at your life. What kind of evidence is there? If you are a believer, there should be evidence of some measure of morality and growing in morality, growing in integrity, understanding this and hungering after it. There is a social test. We've been talking about this of late, the last few weeks together. The love that we should have towards God's people, a sacrificial love, a forgiving love, a love that goes the second mile, a supernatural love, a love that reaches beyond just a human level and a willingness to get along with everybody. It seeks unity. It desires to be right with each other. It goes beyond what just the call of ordinary social interaction is. Do you have a love for God's people? Are you willing to go the second mile for them? Do you reach out and help them? Are you recognizing that in them, that you are a brother or a sister to them, that there's a camaraderie, that they deserve your help at times, and they deserve your help at times as well as the other way around. 1 John 3:14, we know that we have passed out of death unto life. This is the mark. How do you know you're a believer? You've passed from death out of life because we love the brothers. Whoever does not love abides in death. It's plain and simple. So John, in a very simple way, in a sense, has said it this way. Do you love Jesus? Do you love his commands? Do you love his people? This is the mark of authentic Christianity. And this is what the book of John is all about. And it reiterates this and brings these things up and pulls them apart over and time again. And so now John, as he reaches towards the end of the book, he begins to encapsulate the essence of these ideas. And as he begins to reach his conclusion, and he knows he's coming to an end, and he's running out of breath, as it were, he's now beginning to capsulize these, to put these in more clearly, in succinct form. That's what we see in these verses 1-5. He also checks in a couple of other opportunities to learn some things. I just want to say this so you're clear on what these signposts are about. These are markers that you are a believer. I want to make this clear because it's easy for this to be misunderstood. These are not the things you do that make you a believer. These are signposts to tell you that you are on the right road. These are the things that God has given us so that the believer who questions their faith, who is worried, who introvertedly looks at themselves, who feels the condemning work of their own heart, of their own guilty conscience, of the work of the evil one, that they have a measurement to go to and say, wait a second, I do actually measure up. This is not the signpost to tell you that if you check these boxes, somehow it makes you a follower of Christ. If I'm making myself clear at all. If you're heading west towards Winnipeg and you see a sign that says 64 kilometers to Halifax, it might be an indication to you that you are on the wrong road. This is simply what these are. They measure for you to know if you are on the right road. But you can try in yourself to work up these things. That doesn't put you on the right road. I hope I'm making sense. This is an important distinction. These things do not make you a believer. They're indications that you already are a believer. So having said that, trying to make myself clear in too many ways, 1 John 5, verses 1-5, beginning at verse 1. I want to pause before we even get started because there is a delightful little word here, believes. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. This is again a reiteration of something that we've already seen. It's the theological test. What do you believe about Jesus? I just want to pause here because there's a technical issue in the Greek, in the original, that doesn't come through in English, that I'm going to take the chance on boring you with while I explain it to you. There's some things that happen as you do your study and as I go through the work of finding and trying to pull to parts the pieces of this jigsaw puzzle, if you will, and put it back together and give a picture, that I discover things that I think are interesting. And sometimes what I do is I say, that's so interesting. I'm going to pretend that everybody else in the room is also going to be interested in this, and I'm going to tell you about it. There's chances are that this you might find a little tedious and technical, and your eyes will get a little glazy. That's your problem, not mine. This is interesting. The word believes here, and again, I know I could go to the length of showing you the word in the Greek and pulling it out. It gets too technical, so just go with me, all right? The word here is in the present tense. When a Greek author can choose to write a verb down, he can do so by spelling it certain ways and putting different endings on it. If you know some languages, Latin I think is one of them, endings, you can change the word by the way that you spell it and add an ending to it. We do this very subtly by simply adding the letter S on the end of a word. It changes it entirely. Or an ES, clothe to clothes, cloth to clothes. Okay, it's just subtle, but we change it by the ending. Greek does the same thing, and it does this to express an idea that in English it doesn't come out, because we're just translating the word into English. But in essence, what he is saying here, by using the spelling and the tense of the word, he's actually saying this is the word believes that has a moment in time beginning, but it continues and continues in an ongoing stream. It is a belief that lingers. It is a belief that is steadfast. It is a belief that is secure. It is a belief that doesn't just come in your head and say, oh, I agree with that. It's not a belief that says, oh, I can give some mental assent to that. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, well, I don't disagree with you. No. This is a belief that goes to the core of a person so that now their life as an ongoing change is built on this belief. It is a belief that is at the core of who they are and continues. Everyone who continues and is persevering in the belief that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. It's not a head knowledge belief, it's a heart knowledge belief. Let me give you an example of an opposite effect of this. The same word spelled a different way in John chapter 2, but translated into English as the same word believed. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. Let's stop there. This word is in a different tense, called, again technical, called the aorist tense. Pretend you're interested. And this means that it happened at a point in time, a one-time moment, and immediately came to an end. It was a finger snap of belief. They believed. But there's a very big difference between aorist tense belief and present tense belief, because present tense belief has a lingering side effect. These people believed, but it was only just a head knowledge, quick. Why did they believe? When they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, look what his response was to this kind of belief. But when Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man. He knew that these people's belief was simply a flash in the pan. It was a joyride for the sake of the miracles. It was an excitement of what was going on at the time. It was not wanting to be left out, and all the hubbub of what was being stirred in the society and the religious talk. Oh, let me in on that. Oh, I believe. Oh, I know about Jesus. But there was no genuine response in their heart. In John chapter 8, we have an example of this word present tense, lingering belief being used. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed, present tense, lingering, genuine belief, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples. Pardon my staccato reading of that, but I want you to see the difference. If now, because of this belief that now continues and perseveres and lingers and continues, if you abide in it, you will be demonstrating you truly are my disciples. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. When you abide in this belief, what happens in this text is the Jews are now offended by this, and they say, we don't need to be set free. We have Abraham as our father. They have a bit of a discussion, and before the end of the chapter, they're picking up stones to stone Jesus. What did they just demonstrate? That their believing was not an abiding believing. If you abide, Jesus warned them, you will prove you're my disciples. Surprisingly enough, before the end of the chapter, everything was different. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. This is another verb, has been born. Has been is the present passive tense. Again, it has the lingering effect, but it's in the passive voice. Why do you care? Because when something is passive, it's because you become the recipient, and it has nothing to do with you. We use the passive voice in English. He threw me the ball. Doesn't mean I caught it. It might have bounced off my face, but he threw me the ball. I had nothing to do with the throwing. I had nothing to do with that action. It was towards me, but it wasn't me who did it. Passive. You have been born of God. This is meaning to say, whatever takes place in regard to this being born of God, whatever this is, it is something that is passively received. God does the being born. He has been received something from God passively, and this thing, being born of him, happened to him from outside of him. So everyone who continues in a lingering, steadfast belief that Jesus is the Christ, this is because something outside of them has happened to them to change them, to bring them to this belief. It is called being born of God. I don't need to tell you that John has taken this theme in his gospel, spoke to Nicodemus about being born again. John mentions this several times within the book of John. What is this being born of God? Let's be clear. Paul writes about this to Titus in chapter 3, and he says it this way. When the goodness and loving kindness of God our Savior appeared, he saved us. Not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his own mercy, by the washing of regeneration and renewal of the Holy Spirit. Now, I recognize this morning that there's a high likelihood that I'm speaking to people who know what that is to have experienced the new birth. To know what it is to have experienced an encounter with God such that God himself regenerates your dead heart. That God himself washes by regeneration that you cannot do by your own works, cleanses you of your sin, gives you spiritual life and renewal to real life by a work of the Spirit of God. Christ quickened your understanding in a moment. Whether you heard the gospel when you were 5 or when you were 35, you came to a point of recognizing a few things that you realized were true about you. Not because you decided this. God quickened in you a realization that you fall short of the glory of God, that you will not make God's kingdom in your own efforts. And you realize that the bridge or the means by which you could reach God is through Christ and Christ alone. And suddenly, the eyes of faith are opened in you, and you recognize that the answer to your spiritual problem is Jesus. It comes in that moment to you, the thing you have to have beyond all things. And you, by faith, call out, asking God in whatever words you've used to cleanse you of your sin, forgive you of your past, to come into your life, whatever words you said in your heart, in your mouth, whatever it was, this was your act of faith. You responded because God quickened in you, regenerated in you, the means by which you could see Christ, know Christ, love Christ, receive Christ, and you took Christ. That happened at the moment you were born of the Spirit of God. You were born not first physically, and now you are born spiritually, born again, a second time, a second birth. This is only of God. He saved us. Not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his own mercy. If this has not been your experience with God, then you must come to know God through the new birth. Christ himself said, you cannot see the kingdom of God unless you are born of the Spirit of God. This, by the way, is a mark that separates this doctrine, this truth, this teaching that I just fleshed out for you very quickly, is a mark, a distinguishing mark of many churches, but it separates us from many mainline denominations who disregard that notion that there is any need for a new birth or a second birth. This, by the way, just for the sake of you understanding this, is a hallmark of the Reformed Church from the last 500 years. We teach that you must be born of the Spirit of God. You will find people who claim to know Christ who think that that whole idea is not to be regarded. But we are born by the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Spirit. And so something has happened in our lives. Everyone now who has this ongoing, lingering, steadfast, persevering belief that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Savior, that he is the one who rescues you, that he is the one. Everyone who has this ongoing belief has been renewed, regenerated by the Spirit of God, has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. So now it's reversed. If you love the Father, you love the Father, you'll now love those who are the children of God. Verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. Now, if you haven't caught it, I read verse 1 and 2 really quickly. If you slow down and read that, you will find that he has just said this in a complete and absolute circle. If you love God, it is because you love the children of God. And if you love the children of God, you will love God and obey his commandments. And if you love God and obey his commandments, it will automatically mean you love the children of God, which will give evidence that you love God and want to obey his commandments. And what are his commandments? To obey and love the children of, or to love the children of God, which is evidence of the fact that you love God and that you obey his commandments. And it's just one big happy circle. And this only happens and continues in the life of a genuine believer who has been born of the Spirit of God. This fruit is so intermingled that you can't pull out one thread without pulling out them all. If you're going to love his commands, it's going to mean you're going to love his children. If you love his children, it means you love God. Because only you would love God to love his children. And if you're loving his children, you're obeying his commands. The whole thing is together. What has he just said in these first two verses? You love Jesus, love his commands, and love his people. This is a summary of this book. This is the evidence, the hallmark evidence that you know that you know. Not are you perfect, but is there evidence in your heart that you have been born of the Spirit of God, because this is the fruit of your life. Verse 3. I'll be happy to know we're just halfway through the text. We're going to go quick. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome. So we love God when we obey God. It's evidence. This is not a checklist. This is not now me saying, oh, if I obey all his commandments and wouldn't do everything that he tells me to do, somehow I'm giving the evidence that I love God. No, no. Loving God comes first. John 14, verse 15. John recorded Jesus' words. If you love me, that comes first. You will keep my commandments. You will keep my commandments. If you love me, it's just going to be the natural outflow. You will keep my commandments. Because you love me, the natural response of your heart will be, I want to do righteousness. I want to live the right way. I want to put sin out of my life. You may not be perfect, but your heart's hunger and desire is for righteousness. You hunger and thirst for righteousness. This is the second phrase. Let's just pause there. Let's look at the second phrase. His commandments are not burdensome. Do you know what the commandments are? I wore this tie today on purpose. Many of you can't see it because you don't care anyways, but it has the 10 commandments written on it. Why did I wear this tie? Because I knew I had this verse to look at today. Thank you very much to the Beaumonts for this tie. I think it was from the Beaumonts. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. His commandments. What are his commandments? You know them. Do not lie, do not steal, do not commit adultery. You know, I'm not telling you the order of them. You know what they are. Do not have any other false gods. You know, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. To summarize it, love your neighbor as yourself. These are his commandments. Why would he suddenly say his commandments are not burdensome? What's that about? Would you know that it's highly likely that John remembers, I mean, we don't know this for a fact, but John may have been reflecting back to Jesus' words as he was speaking to the Jewish people who had had commandments heaped upon them, who believed that keeping the commandments, a checklist of commandments, made them right with God. And the commandments were a burden. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you had to do this, you had to do this, you had to give so much, you had to be there on this day, you had to stand in this position, you had to keep your hands in this position, you had to do that, you had to wash your hands here, you had to dress like do that, cut your hair, don't cut your hair, all that, a list of 145,666, I made that number up, things that you had to do to make yourself pleasing to God. And it's burdensome. Some of you grew up perhaps in that kind of environment where you were told on a Sunday, sit on your bed, you can't ride your bike, you can't watch TV, you can't play with your friends. Why? Because we think somehow when we don't do something, it automatically makes us holy. So we do this, or we don't do this, and it becomes a burden. But Jesus said these words, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. Why are you laboring? You're laboring under the desire to constantly please God. And you're tired of it. And you're heavy laden by trying to keep this exhausting list. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What is Jesus saying? Come to me because I don't require a bunch of list of things of do's and don'ts. What do? I put my heart in you so that now you actually want to do those things. You actually desire to live righteously. There's something that's changed in you that now righteousness, it just wants to be there. I'm not saying that suddenly you're perfect and you keep every commandment, but in your heart something has changed. His commandments are not burdensome because he has changed us by the Spirit of God. Ask yourself this. Are you keeping the commandments? Are they being obeyed so that God will be pleased with me? It so happens, this is none of your business, but I'm telling you anyways, that I don't cut my lawn on a Sunday or do yard work on a Sunday. Two reasons for that. Second being, I'll work backwards. Second being, I hate yard work, so any excuse is a good one not to do it. The first one is, it is simply a reflection. I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want you to get the impression that I'm trying to give you a list of how you're supposed to live. I'm just telling you what comes out of my life, okay? I don't care what you do with your lawn and your yard. I'm not asking you to do anything particular or not. Don't hear me wrong, okay? This is not a lesson on how you're all supposed to behave. I'm just telling you something that's none of your business. That out of my heart, for whatever reason, an understanding in my upbringing, my background, my heart towards God, I want to have some respect for the Lord's day. I want to show some measure of acknowledgement in my own life, in my own spirit. I work on a Sunday, okay? I need something to show some reflective time to God that I respect, that you deserve to be worshiped. You deserve a day of worship. It's not a legalistic thing in me. I don't do this because somehow I think when I don't cut my lawn, God loves me so much more. That is legalism. And that is the burden that we put upon ourselves with commandments. I do it out of a heart that just desires to show honor and respect for God. We taught our children not to play sports on a Sunday because I'm a legalist. No, because Sunday is a special day that we honor the creator of the earth. Am I telling you how to live your life? No. You go do what you think is right before God. I am telling you it's easy to have commandments be a burden. Or are they being obeyed out of a desire for your heart? I desire to please God. Not for God to be pleased with me, but somehow now I just want to show my love for God. I just want to respond in some way to God. And so out of my life, suddenly I'm keeping one of the commandments without even trying, without even making it a burden, without even being a problem. I don't shop on a Sunday. Have I ever shopped on a Sunday? Yes, I have. Whoa, I think I might have backslid. Not at all. God gives you liberty to do what you can and cannot do, and circumstances and situations are such that how you live out and express your Christian faith is birthed in you by the Spirit of God, who has put his commands in you. His commands are not burdensome. Suddenly you want to be honoring to your parents. Suddenly you want to love your neighbor. Suddenly you want to be full of integrity and tell the truth. Suddenly you feel guilty when you tell a lie. Suddenly there's something in you that desires to be right with other people. Where did that come from? His commands are not burdensome. They just show up. And that is how the Spirit of God brings his people to be obedient to him, to love his commandments. Everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. What? Where did this come from? Does this seem random? John is about 80 years old when he wrote this book. Can you tell? Suddenly, it feels to me like whiplash. Everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. I don't know, maybe it seems normal to you in the context, but it just feels like a thought that he just threw in there. This is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. It actually has a context, and it actually does make sense to the context. Let me just take a second here to wrap this sermon up and make a landing before we go any longer than we need to. You know what John is talking about when he talks about overcoming the world, because we know the text. He's already talked about this earlier in the book. We know the world is a reference not to the cosmos, to the physical world, but to the ideologies, to the isms, to the ideas, to the ethos, to the heart, to the thinking, to the direction that the world takes. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. All that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away, along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. If you don't know those verses, I would suggest you even commit them to memory. It's a great text. What is the world? It is the desires of the eyes, the desires of the flesh, and the pride in possessions, boasting and pride of life. All this is the mainstay thinking of the world. But the believer has overcome the world. What does that mean? By the way, the word overcome is the Greek word Nike, which is exactly where that word came from and why it is used. It means to conquer, to overcome, to be victorious. I don't need to tell you, it doesn't mean swoosh, but that's why they use the word. To overcome. What is it that we overcome? I stick this text up here, or this slide up here, to be just quick about this because we're going late. Overcome the world. What does the world want you to do? The world wants you to love the things you don't have. This is the way the world functions. You want to be rich. You want to be famous. You want to have that job. You want to have that car. You want to have that house. You want to have this. You want to have that. You want to have that ring. You want to have this necklace. You want to have those people. You want to have these clothes. You want to have that makeup. You want to have this swimming pool in your yard. You've got to have this. You want to have that. You don't have it, but you want it. And to want it, and it dangles out in front of you, and it's hanging out there like a carrot, and this is how the world functions. And the world is always clamoring after something it does not have. Or, on the other hand, you have it. You've made it. And now you have to flaunt it. And now everybody has to see that you've got it. And you're special. And you're better than the next person. And you're higher than somebody else because you've arrived. You've got this. You've got that. And you know the world. It's always telling you how to live, how to smell, how to look, how to walk, how to talk, what to believe, how you're to dress, what kind of clothes what kind of car you're supposed to drive, what kind kind of house you should have to be so-and-so, where you need to be, what you need to do. The world has its opinion, and the world is clamoring after the things that the world wants. How will you ever, in your idolized heart, in your heart that hungers and lusts after all that this world offers you, how are you ever going to overcome the pressures of the world? Your faith. Who is it that overcomes the world? Except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. You will never overcome the world and the lusts of the world and the clamoring after the things of this world unless you're born of the Spirit of God. And an evidence that you truly know God is, in fact, that the world loses its luster to you. That the world suddenly begins to fade away in its interest for you. I mean, sure, we need clothes, we need a house, we need practicality, we need to live. Yes, we need these things. But the things themselves are not the things that I hunger after and I chase after and I desire. We can only overcome this, and it's an evidence that you truly know Christ. Because the world will always be the world. The world will always clamor and hunger after things it doesn't have. But the church, she's different. She loves Jesus. She loves his commands. She loves his people. And we are the only people who can bear evidence of the reality of God changing our hearts because we have been born of his Spirit. And now even the world itself fades away, seems uninteresting, seems distant and kind of strange.